So when I was editing the video, I realized that my cap is not centered on my head. So yeah, you guys are gonna deal with that. What is up, you guys, and welcome back to my channel. I hope that wherever you are in the world, you're doing well and staying safe. If you're new here, my name is Richard, and every week I make videos about men's fashion, streetwear, and sneakers. So if that sounds like the kind of content you want to watch, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below for my future videos. Now, in the introduction for last week's video, I talked about how the foundations of my channel, as well as my interest in sneakers and streetwear, has been born out of black youth culture. So I wanted to make today's video in order to elaborate more on that. I was also inspired by Reggie Casual's latest video, which I'll link up here. And I also wanted to make this video because I think a lot of people have talked about the concept of cultural appropriation, whereby people take things from someone else's culture and just uses it for their own consumption without acknowledging that other culture. So I definitely want to acknowledge the role that black culture has played on my passions today. Also, unfortunately, the fashion and streetwear world hasn't exactly treated these communities kindly in the past. So I also wanted to touch on that in the later part of my video. Also, just to clarify here, when I talk about black youth culture in this video, I'm specifically talking about African American culture. Another disclaimer would that be, I'm just an Asian kid on the internet, and I will admit that I've not lived through any of these things that I'll be talking about now. Everything that I say in this video is just based on my knowledge as well as my research. So I do apologize if I get anything wrong. If I do get anything wrong, please feel free to correct me or let me know in the comments down below. Or to add on to what I've already said, I'm really keen to learn from you guys as well. So with that being said, let's jump right into the video. So the root of sneaker culture actually started with basketball in the 20th century. And the first basketball sneaker that reached mainstream appeal would be the Converse Chuck Taylor All-Star. I'm sure I don't really need to explain to you guys what it is, but for those of you that don't know, it's a high-top canvas sneaker that was used originally for basketball. It was named after a basketball player named Chuck Taylor. He used to play for the Celtics, and after that, he became a traveling sneaker salesman for Converse. By the 1960s, the All-Stars were popular within mainstream media and became associated with rock stars and white counterculture, and it's still relevant today. Now, you guys may be asking me, why am I talking about a shoe from a white guy and a symbol of white counterculture? Well, the reason for this is because I believe that the Chuck Taylor sort of set the precedent for the association of basketball sneakers and mainstream culture. So in the middle of the 20th century, basketball actually started to become associated with black culture. But in the early parts of the 20th century, there were already black basketball teams forming, and this included the first professional black basketball teams, namely the Globetrotters and the Renaissance. So integration of black players into the NBA started in the 1950s, and by the 1960s, black players were dominant in the NBA. And we still see this today. If I'm not wrong, around 75% of NBA players are black, and 47% of the audience is also black. And that makes the NBA the only major North American sport with a non-white majority audience. I read that this is due in part because of the inherently inclusive nature of basketball, whereby basketball was easier to access by many in the black community. So around the same time, leather sneakers became more popular within the sport of basketball, and canvas sneakers such as the All-Stars fell out of favor due to their lack of support, especially to the ankle section. So because of this, Nike and Puma started to associate their leather basketball sneakers with specific athletes. Now, they did this for a few reasons. One, it will make it a lot easier to market these sneakers to non-athletes, because a lot of these non-athletes may have sort of idolized these athletes, and the athletic abilities of these athletes would have been associated with the sneaker as well. So the thinking was that perhaps many of these non-athletes would want to buy the sneaker so that they could be more like their idols. Another reason that they did this was because, like I said earlier, many of the athletes were black at the time. So naturally, a lot of the black community would idolize these athletes, and this would allow these companies to have access to the black community as a market. So what came out of this? For the Nike side, obviously we have Jordans, possibly the greatest sneaker line of all time and the greatest basketball player of all time. And on Puma's side, we have the Puma Clydes, which are still worn today. And the Puma Clydes were actually associated with the basketball player Walt Frazier. Now, another sneaker that gained such popularity during the same time period would be the Adidas Superstar. Now, the story behind the Superstar was that Adidas saw an opportunity to move away from athletic sneakers and to move into the basketball sneaker market with a leather sneaker that provided superior support, like I mentioned earlier, compared to canvas sneakers. So the original sneakers that Adidas released were called the Super Grip, which was the low top model, and the Pro model, which was the high top model. And over the next few years, the Super Grip will actually evolve into the Superstars that we know today, incorporating the shell toe to increase durability. So of course, Adidas did also associate with Superstars with a celebrity athlete, and that will be Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Now, the reason why I'm talking about the Superstars specifically is because not only were Superstars popular in basketball, and hence associated itself with sneaker culture, but it also marked the transition of the association of sneakers with solely basketball culture to the association of sneakers with hip-hop culture as well. So before we move on, let's talk about what exactly is hip-hop culture. So hip-hop was a culture that evolved from the disco culture of the 70s within New York, and this was started where groups of Caribbean and African American youth would gather around in impromptu block parties in neighborhoods such as the Bronx. And these block parties served as a way for these often marginalized groups to come together to express themselves through music and dance. So many will attribute the pioneering of hip-hop music to DJ Kool Herc, who was a Jamaican-born DJ from a party that he hosted in 1973. The rap artists within the hip-hop culture often talked about social political issues that affected them that the mainstream media was not willing to talk about. And eventually, hip-hop culture grew to encompass not just rap music, but also other areas of self-expression such as graffiti and breakdancing. So going back to how the superstars were associated with hip-hop culture. Now this will be attributed to one of the greatest hip-hop groups of all time, Run DMC. So Run DMC really liked to wear Adidas apparel, and this of course included the Adidas superstars. And they even made songs about the superstars such as My Adidas. Fans of Run DMC also used to wear these superstars and used to hold them up during their concerts while they were playing. And Adidas took note of this. So eventually, Adidas signed an official endorsement with Run DMC. And Run DMC also mentioned that this celebrity endorsement sort of helped to legitimize hip-hop culture in the mainstream media. I believe that this also set the precedent for many sneaker collaborations with rappers that we see nowadays. So, as we can see, the areas of basketball and hip-hop culture helped to cement the association between sneakers and black youth culture. But talking about Run DMC and hip-hop culture is a perfect segue into the next segment, where we talk about how streetwear has been associated with black youth culture. So in order to understand what streetwear is, we need to look at the word itself, which would literally just be comprised of the word street and wear. So a lot of people think that streetwear just encompasses things like graphic tees and hoodies, but there's a lot more to that. It also encompasses sneakers, so everything I've talked about is still relevant now. And it's basically just based on the culture of the street at the time, or what everyday people are wearing. So there are really no set rules to it, and it can encompass anything that's popular at the time. Now some will argue that the streetwear culture that we know and love today came from New York. And in fact, Teddy Santee from Aimé Leon Dore does argue this. And it's clear to see the influence of basketball on the street culture of New York. But the other segment of street culture within New York also comes from hip-hop. So let's talk about hip-hop music's influence on street culture. So back in the day, rappers were always seen as style icons, and there was almost like this competition between the rappers to see who could dress better. And it's still like that today. And this is in stark contrast to punk culture at the time, which was anti-capitalism and anti-consumerism. And whereas hip-hop seemed to embrace this kind of thing. So now let's talk about some specific groups or artists that were highly influential within the streetwear scene. So of course, on the East Coast, we have Run DMC, I talked about earlier. They used to wear a lot of Adidas tracksuits, and this also started to influence other areas of hip-hop culture, such as breakdancers. Tracksuits are also still a staple in streetwear culture today. Also, LL Cool J, another popular hip-hop artist, made brands such as FUBU and Kangol Cool. And of course, we can't forget Biggie Smalls. Now Biggie Smalls of course had this signature Coogi tee, but he also started to wear a lot of Timberlands, and Timberlands are obviously a staple in New York street fashion today. Now speaking of Timberlands, these were also worn by West Coast rappers such as Tupac. Tupac also wore a lot of Carhartt, and the influence of that is clearly seen in streetwear today. Another popular West Coast hip-hop group that sort of had an influence within streetwear would be NWA. They popularized the wearing of Coach or starter jackets, as well as fitted caps, because of the association with the Raiders. Now, I couldn't find as much information about the influence of West Coast hip-hop groups on streetwear as compared to East Coast hip-hop groups, but my man Keezy from Keezy TV has made a really good video about this, and I'll link it over here. I highly encourage you guys to watch this video because the production value is insane, and I also highly encourage you guys to subscribe to his channel because he makes really great videos. Now, there were also other brands that started to associate with the hip-hop movement, such as Carl Candy and Cross Colors, and a lot of these hip-hop artists also started to make their own brands, such as Wu Wear, Rockerwear, and Sean John, and this really helped to cement the association between streetwear and hip-hop culture. Now, like I alluded to earlier, rappers still play an integral role within streetwear. So for example, a decade ago, Lil Wayne had a lot of influence within the streetwear scene, and nowadays we have rappers like Kanye West, A$AP Rocky, and Travis Scott. Now, it could also be argued that Pharrell and the rest of NERD had a big role to play in the popularity of Nigo's brand Big within the US. And more recently, we see Tyler the Creator having a huge impact on the skatewear side of streetwear with his brand Golf Wang. Now, with all that being said, nowadays, streetwear has grown a lot, and a lot of people have started to incorporate elements of high fashion into their style, which leads me onto my next section. So nowadays, we see the likes of people like Virgil Abloh and Kanye West bridging the gap between streetwear and high fashion, as well as rappers like A$AP Rocky adopting high fashion into their personal style. However, this all also has its roots in hip-hop culture. So we have people like Jean-Michel Basquiat, who was an artist. He started out doing graffiti and then moved into painting. And it could be argued that he was one of the first people to pioneer this mix between high and low that we see on the streets, as well as in brands today like Noah and Aimé Leon Dore, which I've covered before. Now, Basquiat used to wear brands like Comme des Garçons, Issey Miyake, as well as Armani. And he even walked on the runway for Comme des Garçons in 1987, I believe. Now, another influential figure within the scene would be Dapper Dan. So Dapper Dan was a haberdasher as well as a couturer in New York City, and he gave hip-hop artists in the 80s and 90s access to the world of high fashion and luxury. Now, just a bit of background on this. During these times, luxury brands did not want to associate with hip-hop culture, and the clientele was mostly white. So Dapper Dan gave these hip-hop stars access towards this world of fashion, and he used to go and buy luxury products as well as luxury hardware, and he used them to make custom pieces or knockoff pieces. However, unfortunately, he was sued by a lot of these luxury companies and he was forced to close in the 90s. So this will also lead me to my last point, which would be the fact that the black community has not often been treated well by the fashion world. So firstly, let's talk about how this has happened in sneakers. Unfortunately, in the 80s and 90s, there was a rise on sneaker-related crime and sneaker-related violence because of the clear links between sneaker culture and the black community. These crimes were also sort of conflated with the black community, and this association was established. And of course, this isn't good for their image. In fact, Run DMC also used to wear the superstars without the laces, and this is compared to how shoes were worn within the prison system, whereby inmates are not allowed to wear their shoes with shoelaces so that they cannot use the shoelaces to make weapons out of them. So this obviously led to negative connotations of the group themselves as well as hip-hop culture as a whole, and this of course affected the black community. So in response to this, Run DMC actually made the song My Adidas, and they said this about the song. It was a song that was about our sneakers, but it was bigger than just talking about how many pairs we had. It came from the place of people would look at the B-boys and B-girls and go, oh, those are the people that caused all the problems in here. And those young people are nothing but troublemakers, and those young people don't know anything. So they was judging a book by its cover without seeing what was inside of it. And that was said by Daryl McDaniels, also known as DMC, who was part of Run DMC. Some would also argue that the commodification of rap accelerated this. So as rap music became more and more commercialized, the messages within rap music moved away from political messages to messages that some politicians deemed about violence and misogyny. So this of course had negative impacts on the perception of black communities as well. And this also led to negative connotations being associated with streetwear and sneakers. It's also been said that because of the commercialization of rap, a lot of these rap artists were pressured to conform to these gangster roles to be more marketable. And now for my last point would be the fact that the black community has often been marginalized by the high fashion world. So I mentioned earlier when I was talking about Dapper Dan about how high fashion and luxury brands didn't really want to associate themselves with hip-hop culture in the 80s and 90s. Nowadays, of course they do. You can see a lot of rappers who are dripped out in a lot of luxury and high fashion brands. But there have been some people who argue that this has not come from a place of acceptance, but rather they see these rap artists as a marketing opportunity to gain access to black communities. And a lot of people have called these practices a bit predatory. Also, my guy Ayo from the Fashion Archive also talks about how a lot of black designers in the high fashion world are finding it difficult to break in because they are automatically labeled as streetwear designers by fashion critics and fashion journalists. And these include people like Samuel Ross from McCall Wall and Shane Oliver from Hook by Air. Ayo has actually also made a lot of great videos regarding racism and diversity within the fashion community. I'll link one of them here. So I highly encourage you guys to go check his videos out as well, and as well as to subscribe to him. He makes really great content, and at least 80% of the stuff I know about fashion today is because of him. Now, that brings me to the end of today's video. I hope that you guys enjoyed it and learned something from it. And I think we also need to remember that as a fashion community, unfortunately, there also still seems to be a lot of systemic racism within the system. So once again, I'll link a resource to the Black Lives Matter movement down below so that we can educate ourselves. Now, if you liked the video, make sure to leave a like button down below. It really helps out the channel. And if you want to see more videos about streetwear and fashion in the future, make sure to hit the subscribe button down below. Now until next time, see you guys and peace out.